Hey y'all, welcome back. Today we're checking out the surprising reason Americans are larger than Brits. It's not what you think. Fat people.
About 40% of all Americans are considered obese. Not just overweight, but obese, defined as a body mass index of over 30. In the UK, still one of the most overweight nations in Western Europe, that obesity rate drops to about 20%. And on top of that, a recent study done in 2024 found that when it comes to health, American adults have higher levels of hypertension, high cholesterol, and worse cardiovascular health than their British counterparts. Funnily enough, when the Americans and Brits had to rate if they thought their own health was good, Americans were more likely to say yes, and Brits were more likely to say no, which wasn't reflected in the data, but that's a whole other topic.
Interesting.
Americans, on the whole, are much heavier than Brits. It's just a fact. And I think that you'd have to be living under a rock to not know that one of the many stereotypes about Americans that people from around the world have is that Americans are overweight. There are plenty of memes, jokes, and quotes about it, and I have to say, Americans are not unaware of this stereotype.
Oh yeah. Hang on. Nobody. Americans upvoting memes about them being fat. Y'all, it's fat Leonardo DiCaprio. It's so funny. Wow. Look at that. Huh. When you finally get your American citizenship. When you realized why America's childhood obesity rate ain't just a number. Italy. Oh. That looks good. America. Chocolate milk and pizza. Chocolate dessert. Mac and cheese. And a rotten apple. The Italians got grapes. A little salad. Bread, frites, fries, and a fish on a bed of lettuce.
Aware of this stereotype. In this case, they often are aware how they're perceived around the world. And I think it's easy to attribute a lot of this to other negative stereotypes about American culture. You might say Americans are lazy, Americans lack self-control, Americans are greedy when it comes to food and when it comes to money. But to really understand why the obesity problem in America is much worse than in the UK and why Brits are healthier in general, we need to look deeper than the stereotypes. In this video, we're investigating the foundations of people's lives in each of these countries to see how they got there. There is a lot of individual choice that goes into every single person's life every single day, but there's also a very forceful undercurrent of the culture and socio and economic structure in which they're raised. And my argument in this video is that that can shape us just as much as eating an extra Twinkie can. Now let's start practical.
Okay, before she starts, let's see if I can predict what she's gonna say. First of all, I think we have a lot more crap in our food, like stuff we probably shouldn't be eating, chemicals, the processed stuff, preservatives, probably not good. We have a lot of sugar and stuff, even in our bread. Our bread is basically cake. Advertising? I think there's more shameless fast food advertising here, probably, maybe. The car culture, maybe, makes drive-thrus more convenient. Maybe? Those are my guesses. Tell me, Kaylin.
Movement is something that keeps people healthy. A lack of exercise isn't going to make or break your weight if you're already eating healthy, but for many, it certainly helps keep things in check. In the UK, there's a very prevalent walking culture. Is it just because Brits love to walk? Yes, some of them do, sure. But also, Britain is much more set up for walking than many other countries.
Those paths! We don't have those paths.
Small landmass and concentrated areas of people mean that things are much closer together. For a lot of towns, you might park in the town center and then do your shopping or errands by walking from place to place. In villages, especially, you might not even need a car. But in the US, in a lot of areas, this just isn't the case. Outside of the major walking cities like New York City and Boston, everything is so spread out that you have to drive from store to store and from errand to errand. In many areas, walking between them would be out of the question. And sure, there are plenty of places in the UK that aren't walkable, but the American driving culture developed because of how—
Yo, this is LA. I recognize this. I've driven on this road many times. That's the 110 headed north.
How spread out it is. With a lack of other people walking around, you feel culture developed because of how spread out it is. With a lack of other people walking around, you feel very exposed, and it's a totally different atmosphere than it feels to walk in the UK where more people are on foot. But walking and driving culture alone doesn't explain major obesity levels in America. Often, that starts with food intake. From a cultural perspective, fast food is one of the most appreciated things in America. Plenty of worldwide fast food chains like McDonald's have their origins in the US. Brits consume fast food too, by the way, and at higher rates than Western Europe, and we can see this with the amount of fast food chains available in the UK. But America still leads the way per capita in fast food consumption. And culturally, this makes sense. America values fast. We value go. We work longer hours. We take less vacation time. We are a nation of hustle and of wanting things to be as quick as possible. Our culture around eating is even different than in the UK when it comes to how long we would take to enjoy our meal. Eat a meal at a restaurant in the US and you won't be sticking around after you've finished eating. There's no talk.
Yo, that's the McDonald's in Times Square. I'm pretty sure. I've sat right here. Like crazy.
At a restaurant in the US and you won't be sticking around after you've finished eating. There's no talking, there's no hanging out, there's no sitting and enjoying each other's company after you've finished, because the tipping culture means that the waiter or waitress needs your table after you're finished in order to get more tips. In the UK, the pace of eating is slower. It's enjoyed more, it takes longer, and that leads to a lower rate of fast food consumption than the US. Americans also eat out more often. While costs are rising everywhere, it's still cheaper to go out and get food in a restaurant in America than it is comparatively in the UK.
Yo, this little footage of this kid eating this sandwich really triggered me. I thought this whole thing was going to fall out the back. Kid, you got to hold it. You got to hold the bread together in the back. Wish I could teach this kid a life skill. One day he's going to bite into a burger and it's just going to fall into his lap. Poor kid. He'll learn the hard way, I guess.
Americans also eat out more often. While costs are rising everywhere, it's still cheaper to go out and get food in a restaurant in America than it is comparatively in the UK. I also find that many Brits consider going out to a restaurant to be reserved for something special. Maybe a get-together with a friend that you haven't seen, or some sort of occasion like a birthday or date night, but it needs some sort of reason. In America, we're much more used to eating out just because. We don't really need a reason.
The only reason is laziness. You just want it. That's my reason.
We don't really need a reason. Our culture is to enjoy food out at restaurants more in our average week than in the UK. And unfortunately for American waistlines, when you do eat out, you're likely consuming more calories than if you ate at home. And eating out at restaurants on its own is really not a problem to me. People sometimes think that I put down Americans on this channel, and that's not it at all. I actually prefer the American culture of how often we go out to eat. I find it fun. It breaks up the week, and it's how things like American diner culture thrive.
Yeah, sometimes you just don't feel like cooking. Most of the time. So you order a little Postmates. Walk around the corner to the Thai restaurant. Right? Everybody does that. Hedonism.
You don't win any sort of moral points for how often you eat at home versus at a restaurant, but it does make it much more difficult to manage food intake and to not get carried away. But the American obesity problem...
This person. Oh, this poor guy. I think it's a guy. Because of the hair. Dang, y'all. I wonder if he knew when he volunteered to do this B-roll footage, if it would be used to show obese people. At least he has a laptop table. Built in. Automatic.
But the American obesity problem goes deeper than just not walking and eating more often at restaurants.
Okay.
There are much more sinister things underneath the surface.
Chemicals.
Firstly, food lobbyists. The American government is not just run by politicians, but by lobbyists who essentially work on behalf of various industries to get laws passed on things that benefit them. And
lobbying should be illegal, y'all. How is it legal? How is it okay? How is it okay?
To get laws passed on things that benefit them. And food and drink lobbyists are the same. These industries, with their dollars, are swaying government policy on everything from taxes on junk food to advertising laws to the number of food additives allowed. It's no surprise to many that food regulation laws in the US are much less strict than in the UK, and there's been a real push in the UK in recent years to try and actually push back against bringing in American style, i.e., more lax regulations surrounding food.
Yeah, don't do it, y'all. Don't let it in. I think in America, we just within the past year, decided that yellow dye number 5 was not okay. Just now. But we've known that it's a carcinogen for a lot longer than that. Is it yellow dye number, or it's the red dye? Oh, it's still not. They still have 2 more years to use it. Food manufacturers will have until January 15th, 2027 to reformulate their products. The agency banned the additive in cosmetics in 1990 under the Delaney Clause, a federal law that requires the FDA to ban food additives that are found to cause or induce cancer in humans or animals. 1990, we banned it in makeup. 40 years later, we're banning it in food. But knowing the way things work, these lobbyists will probably get it unbanned before 2027. This makes me angry, y'all. What the America, come on. Come on.
There are so many chemicals in American food that are banned in the UK. Some of these include potassium bromate, which is used in bread and is linked to cancer, an additive called BHA that's a flavor enhancer and food preservative that comes in everything from fast food to cereal, and there's also plenty of synthetic food colorings that are potentially linked to behavior changes in children and possible changes to your DNA. And on top of that, America is one of the only countries in the whole world that doesn't really restrict advertising junk food to children. The number of ads you see in the USA for all types of junk food specifically geared towards kids is staggering. A lot of my favorite ads that I can remember as a kid all have to do with food. The Trix Bunny Rabbit, Captain Crunch's cereal ads, and Fruit Gushers, which are sort of like a sugary gummy, had some very memorable ads geared towards kids.
That's terrifying.
On the flip side, the UK is actively trying to stop advertising junk food to kids and has just recently introduced laws surrounding advertising junk food on television between the hours of 5:30 a.m. and 9 p.m. and online at any time.
That's great. Way to go, UK. Way to go. Which direction is the UK? I think it's that way. Way to take care of your fellow people. We're poisoning each other over here. Hey. I think that potassium bromide is the stuff that's in foam rubber, like yoga mats. We're eating it in our sandwiches.
Whole range of restrictions depending on the food, though companies can still advertise healthier versions of their products or advertise their brand without specifically mentioning individual junk food products. Now, the American mindset on this would likely be that this is unfair to the companies who should be allowed to profit off their junk foods.
No, those companies.
And certainly in the upcoming administration, I would bet anything that we won't see any bans on junk food advertising in the USA.
Oh my God, our president loves junk food. And he hates regulations. It's probably not going to get better. I'm making more work for myself in the editing process by saying but, whatever. You, future me. I'm angry.
And again, I actually do think these are more complex issues than I think sometimes my videos have time to go into. I am interested in the debate between what governments should be allowed to ban regarding advertising and how this is decided, because there's also room here for discussion. But it all plays into the overall picture that we're creating here to understand why Americans are so much more obese than Brits. Another area that impacts health, including weight, is healthcare. Not just specifically for weight loss, but having access to a doctor throughout your life. Even if you don't go to the doctor for help with your weight, it's very much noticed. They might bring it up as something that could be causing your bad back, or you might come in for something unrelated and they might point it out to you and ask if you've thought about tackling your weight issue to bring you to a better overall level of health.
Yeah. All right, sir, we're just looking at your chart. Hey, did you know you're f***ing fat? You ever think about taking care of that? Maybe eating less barbecue pork? Ever think about that? No? Okay, moving on. That's how it goes.
The point is, healthcare access is important for everyone, and many in the US don't have it. If we think about what happens in the US without something like the NHS, each doctor's visit for many people has a price tag attached. So yes, if you have the correct and high quality insurance, maybe you do maintain good health in the US. But those without will have much fewer doctor's visits because they can't afford them and are only seen by medical professionals for emergencies. And that piles up over a person's lifetime. I think it's easy to say, well, I don't need a doctor to tell me I'm overweight. And that's a fair point, but it's more about the overall structure and inequality when it comes to healthcare access that allows an obesity epidemic to thrive.
That's true. I don't think people need a doctor to tell them they're overweight. But if an overweight person goes to the doctor and the doctor doesn't even mention it, that's going to give the patient this mentality that everything's fine. This is normal.
And finally, there's a much higher level of social and financial safety net in the UK compared to the USA. There's social housing in the UK, more benefits for those in need, and just an overall level of help from the government in the UK that does not exist in the US. The rich are very rich in the US, but the poor are very poor, and there's a massive gap between them.
Yes.
It's been proven that poverty and low income levels lead to poorer eating habits.
Oh, yeah. Like when you're just trying to get by in the day, the last thing you care about is what you're eating. Like you just want, and when you're sad and depressed, you want that junk food, you want that dopamine, Makes it harder to say, no, I'll have a salad with a balsamic vinaigrette, some grilled chicken maybe, tomatoes, hold the croutons. No, give me those croutons. Give me some fried potatoes, right? Give it to me now. I don't know what I'm doing. I just want to do something with it. This video is making me a lot angrier than I thought it would. Makes me sad.
Even if fast food weren't cheaper than eating healthy food, which it typically is, cooking for yourself also requires an amount of time that those struggling may not have. That's not to say that there aren't low-income people in every country. The UK has its share of people who've fallen on hard times or are living in poverty or are not well off for whatever reason. And those people too in the UK are more likely to deal with health issues and to be obese. But the problem is less in the UK than it is in the US, and the inequality levels in the UK are much narrower than in the USA when it comes to things like access to healthcare. So what happens is all of these things pile up. The lack of walking due to the infrastructure, the food lobbyists, the lack of regulations when it comes to junk food, the unequal access to healthcare, and less of a safety net when it comes to social benefits. And you've now created a society in which it's easier to become obese, in my opinion, than in the UK. This video is in no way talking about any individual person or talking about the details of weight gain or loss or the level of personal responsibility required. My point is more cultural, because people are people. And people often aren't just born with certain traits. A baby is a baby, whether it's American or British or Chinese or Swedish or whatever. But the baby is impacted throughout its entire life in the culture in which...
The coloring of this baby threw me. You don't often see babies with orange hair like that, do you? I don't. This baby's gonna be fat. What's it eating? Butter? You're feeding your baby butter? Spoonfuls of butter? Fat baby.
Or whatever. But the baby is impacted throughout its entire life in the culture in which it's raised. And that's how we get different populations that all seem to have things in common. They're all raised in a similar culture, and the American culture, for the reasons that I've gone over, seems to be one where problems with obesity are easier to come by. Now that brings me to the end of this video. I hope I've given you some food for thought, pun completely intended. Leave your comments as always down below. Let's get the discussion started. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
We're fat. Y'all be sure to go to Girl Gone London, like and subscribe, and check out my other reaction channel, JJ Eller Reacts Music, where I react to music. I love food. I love food. I want to eat it all the time. All the time. If it wouldn't make me fat, I would be snacking on something all day long. I want food right now. 40% of us are obese. 40%. Wow. I wonder if that obesity rate has increased. Obesity rates in USA. Graph. Show me a graph. Are we getting more fat or less fat? Obesity rates have tripled over the last 60 years. Whoa. Starts in 1960. Goes all the way to 2018. Oh. Oh yeah, this says in 2018 we went past 40%. Dang. Hey, but only about 10% of us are severely obese. Let's look at the UK. I wouldn't be surprised if the rates go up after the American fast food came to town, if you know what I mean. Trend improvement. Severe obesity among adults ages 16 and over in England. Okay, from 1993. Oh, women are more obese? Why is that? Pregnancy? That doesn't make sense. No. Wait, yep, we're fatter. We're fatter. We win the fat battle. Just kidding. Brits win this when you're healthier. Well, we just got a new administration going here. RFK Jr. is the health guy. Maybe he'll make it better. Maybe he won't. Maybe he'll outlaw vaccines and we'll all have smallpox again. Does that make you thin? Do you get thin on smallpox? Maybe we'll be okay. We got 2 more years of eating poisonous red dye over here. Stuff we outlawed in our makeup in 1990. Just still eating it. Just gobbling it down. Red Skittles. Delicious. Cancer. No wonder. This is depressing. Yeah, y'all be sure to go to Girl Gone London and like and subscribe. Check out my music reaction channel, JJ Ellie Reacts Music. I'd like to thank my patrons. I'd like to thank my Buy Me a Coffee folks. If you're overweight, I still love you. I just want you to get healthy. Thank y'all for watching this with me, and I'll see you next time. Later.